to our next in the breakout session. Effectively, this is the journey through a cyber galaxy with a CSA, Cyber Security Assessment Service, if you like. And James Bissett from our team in Jisc is going to be walking you through here, and we've kindly got Alex from Runshaw College joining the session as well. So just one quick reminder, if you could please use Slido, we can catch those and ask the question at the end. So if you could put any questions in there, and I'll hand over to James.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming to this rather cryptically named session. You had to know maybe what a CSA was. Maybe you're here to answer that very question. And what on earth is the cyber galaxy bit all about? Well, it wasn't exactly my choice of title, but I think it refers to a blog series that I'm writing for Jisc, which is called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So that's the galaxy reference. And my objective really in doing that, and the QR code will take you there, by the way. I think we've got 11 episodes out at the moment, about halfway through the series. And the objective really is, well, as it says on the slide, is to try and help executive leaders in your organizations, who are often the ones who really hold the purse strings for you and can make the big decisions about resourcing your cyber efforts. They're the ones who need to understand more about what is going on in this space. So we've had a range of really interesting sessions. This morning's AI session, absolutely fascinating. Lots of technical stuff about DDoS mitigations and cyber threats and dark web actors and so on yesterday. It's a complicated field that we operate in, and we're the specialists, right? And I thought to myself yesterday, this is my bread and butter, but I still came away from some of those sessions yesterday with a few questions about exactly what are you talking about? And if that's the way I'm feeling, then you can imagine how challenging this is for some of our senior decision makers, for whom this is just one of a number of areas of risk that they've got to manage. And it's a little bit like talking another language to colleagues. If I was standing here talking to you in Portuguese, which I can't do, by the way, it wouldn't take very long before you'll be on your phones and checking your social media feeds and all the rest of it. You will tune out very, very quickly. And that's how it is, I think, for a lot of our senior leaders in this space. So a couple of quotes, not from Douglas Adams here, but from Arthur C. Clarke that I quite like. Here's the first one. That's quite a good one. The next one, because we're all computer scientists and historically we've come from a very binary world. The follow-up to this, does anybody know what it is? It's either outcome is terrifying, yeah, which is quite good. And the final one, which is possibly Arthur C. Clarke's most famous Space Odyssey quote, is this one here. And this one I think is relevant because this, I think, is how executive leaders view cybersecurity. What you do is like magic. It's a black box. I don't understand what goes on. Just make it work. Make the problem go away is often the sort of attitude that we come up against. And so unpicking all of this, demystifying, is a key part of what we as technologists need to be able to do to get the messaging across to our senior leaders to help them understand the risk and help support you in putting in place the mitigations that you require. So if you followed any of my community presentations, I've spoken many times about this document here from Universities UK, published about a year ago, Cybersecurity and Universities Managing the Risk 2023 update. Just as relevant, by the way, to other sectors. It doesn't apply to HE only. And what they've done is a great job of trying to present in terms that non-technical people can understand the sort of landscape that we're dealing with. And they've hung it on 4 pillars, and I'm very pleased to say that those are the same 4 pillars that we've hung the sessions at this year's security conference on. Governance, culture, assurance, and technology. And the interesting thing there is that technology is only one of those pillars. So it's 25% of the problem, and as David Batho was keen to point out yesterday, the other areas are perhaps more important to the solving of the cybersecurity puzzle than the tech itself. We've got to get the governance, the culture, and the assurance right. So getting the language right is really important. We've got to somehow switch from the language that we use day in, day out in our world to language that our leaders are going to understand. And there's a few techniques that I think are valuable that have worked for me. The first one is if I try to explain anything that matters to me professionally to my partner at home, if I get the usual blank look from her, I know I've not done a very good job. If she comes away thinking, okay, I think I just about follow what you're on about, then I'm halfway to getting the message across, I think, to my target audience. So find somebody who's not technical and try and make them understand. Early on in my career, I was a software engineer, and I worked for a little startup company, a university spin-off from within the oil industry. And we got bought out pretty quickly by one of the big players, and they sent up the big guns to come and meet us all. And one of the guys said, I want you to explain to me what it is you do. And he said, the key thing is, if you can't make me understand what you do, then that's your problem, not mine. And that stuck with me throughout my career. And as technologists, I think sometimes we forget that, and we're caught up in our world, and we've got to work hard to get that message across. So the things that matter to our senior risk managers in our organizations are these things here: reputation, intellectual property, safeguarding perhaps, who are our stakeholders, our investors, our research collaborators. Ultimately, our CFO's worried about the financial cost. So we need to find ways of getting those risk messages across and explain the concept simply. So I've tried to do that in my blog post, and hopefully those can be helpful to you when you're trying to get over some aspect of cybersecurity risk within the conversations that you have. Making it easy to understand is going to require analogies, and there's a few that are go-tos for me. The first one is comparing it to flu, which is well understood. We know how to manage flu. It's prevent, contain, recover. We know that prevention is better than cure. There's all sorts of ways that you can develop that analogy. People understand it. It's everyday, it's routine. One of the good things about the flu story, if you can put it that way, is that last year's vaccine is no good for this year's strain of flu. So whatever security measures we put in place before are not necessarily going to remain current. You need to keep revisiting the problem. Well, that's easy enough to understand. Cars have brakes so they can go faster. I can't remember quite who that quote is attributed to, but the idea is that, you know, in the Formula One world, for example, speed is of the essence, but you wouldn't dream of designing that car without the ability to put the brakes on. And security functions within our organizations get a bad rep sometimes as the department of no. And we need to change that so that we're, unlike the brakes, we're not seen as a source of friction per se, but we're seen as an enabler to support the innovation that your organization wants to do, to enable you to move in a rapid, agile way, but to do it securely and with confidence. Building construction, so perimeters, firewall perimeters, internal security. I think about where do you keep your valuables at home. If I were to break into your house, how many barriers would stop me eventually finding those valuables, your jewelry, your passports, whatever. That's a helpful analogy. And then the final one is about kind of operating in a connected world generally. The internet is a great function, it's a great service, we can't live without it, but it carries risk. And there's an inherent risk, a residual risk, that simply comes from connecting our network to the outside world. And that's like diving in the ocean. And sometimes senior decision makers, they focus on the good and the beautiful stuff, the coral reef, the beautiful fish, the stuff that really looks great and is great to go on a web story, without paying attention to the dangers that are in there. So it's a combination of the coral reef populated with piranhas, I think. So cybersecurity is a journey. How are we going to navigate it? Is it going to be like the Starship Enterprise? Sadly, probably not. It's probably going to be more like this. And if you're at my talk yesterday, or any of my online talks, I use this Escher sketch quite a lot. It's the knights going up and down the staircase, and they're going around continually, ascending and descending. We want to be moving in the right direction, but cybersecurity is a little bit more like this. It's small steps at a time, and we're going round revisiting a lot of the same threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations. So, as I said yesterday in my talk, there are 3 things that you need to do that, and our cybersecurity assessment is going to help you about that. So I'm going to say a few words about how we structure that and how it can help you. First of all, it's not an audit. If you've been through the audit process, you'll know how that works. Auditors are looking to put ticks in boxes. They don't really care what the journey has been to get to where you are. It's a show and tell exercise. That has value, perhaps, but it's not necessarily going to help you unpick your thought processes around how you're managing risk, which is what we try to do in our CSA. It's not a certification either, so if you want a badge that says how well you're doing, you need to look elsewhere at Cyber Essentials Plus, ISO 27001, or some other certification. What it is, however, is the broadest possible view that we can try to give you of your security in terms of your tech, your people, and your processes. And it's designed to address those with yourselves as technical people, but also a secondary audience is the executive leadership. And we spend a lot of time trying to get the message about your security posture, what's going well, and what areas for development require attention to that executive audience. So it's very much designed as a supportive exercise to help you build your roadmap and measure how you're doing. So there is technical assessment, as you'd expect. We look at your cloud security as far as your 365 tenancy is concerned. We do some Active Directory security scanning with Ping Castle, and we do some vulnerability scanning internally and externally with Nessus. We use those to inform the discussions that follow. We will then spend 3 days with you and members of your teams looking at 11 different areas of focus which are covered here. So predominantly these are for technical people, but some of them will involve people elsewhere in the organization. So when we're thinking about account management and provisioning users within systems, your HR people are involved in that, your students' records people are involved in that. So we might want to speak about their onboarding and offboarding processes. When it comes to information governance and incident response, at the bottom of the list there, then very often responsibility for that sits somewhere higher up the food chain. And so we might want to speak to somebody there who carries responsibility for that. So it's based on the CIS critical security controls. If you were at my talk yesterday, you'll know there are 153 of those. We sample a basket of those that we think are most applicable to the sector, and we group them into those 11 areas of security practice for simplicity. The questions, however, because the CIS is well plugged in to different certification regimes, we can target those questions to support you if you're working towards Cyber Essentials. We can cover that off, or ISO 27001, or other frameworks that are relevant to you. So what you get out of it, so this is the instrumentation part of building your roadmap. We provide you with, well, 3 reports actually. The main report will give you technical recommendations in each of those 11 areas. So there may be half a dozen recommendations, sometimes more, that are designed very much for you guys in mind. Here are things you should be doing next. Do this now, make this a priority, maybe think about this. Because we do a lot of these across the sector, we are able to tell you about other organizations like your own and what they are doing, and that can be helpful. I talked about this executive summary piece, and I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about this because this is the one area that often generates most discussion after the CSA event is over. So the executive summary includes a broad overview of the threat landscape, 2 or 3 pages. Just what does the UK education sector look like today? What are the threats? How should we think about managing that risk? A summary of your strengths, areas for development, a 1 to 2 page summary of what we found in our visit, in non-technical language, and then a prioritized summary of what we think are up to the 20 most important recommendations for action. We'll also represent things pictorially. There are numerous ways to do that. I think spider diagrams were really popular at the time that our CSA service began, so we've stuck with that. But the idea is you can see on a 1 to 5 scale roughly how you're doing. And in particular, it's going to pinpoint the areas of strength, the areas of weakness. And if you come back and do a repeat CSA, we can overlay one on the other, and hopefully you can see improvement with the diagram as the points push out towards the outside, towards greater level of maturity. The follow-up comes in 2 forms. First of all, we'll speak to you about 3 weeks after we give you the report to say, how's it reading? And in particular, it's what about that executive summary? Because we never get to meet the audience for that executive summary piece. So we're writing that blind, which is a difficult ask of us. We don't always get the pitching right. We kind of pitch it in the middle, and quite often there'll be a bit of feedback to say, that's not quite right. Can you change the emphasis a little bit here? So we can do that. We're not going to change the findings. We come in very much as the view that we are a trusted and critical friend to our members in the sector. So if we find stuff that doesn't look good, we'll tell you it doesn't look good. So we won't change the facts, but we can change the emphases or the tone of the executive summary. And then the final part is an option to actually present the findings to that audience, a senior leadership or audit committee as appropriate. And we can do that for you or with you as you wish. We assign an hour for that, usually 25-35, so we've got plenty of time for Q&A. I have been asked to do it in under 10 minutes recently to an early morning audit committee. That was fun. There wasn't much Q&A. So we can be flexible with that. Some key lessons then that we find generally as we do this. So a lot of IT teams are struggling to deliver security on top of BAU. A lot of our organizations don't have a dedicated security function, so you're trying to keep all the balls in the air and keep on top of managing cyber risk for your organization. It's a big ask, and teams are struggling with resource. Rollout of MFA is still a challenge for a lot of organizations. Okay, they're still encountering pushback in some quarters. Tiered administration, so this idea that you've got separate admin accounts and day-to-day accounts is patchy. So a lot of organizations are doing it, but not necessarily doing it as well as they could. And protection of high-risk users, particularly those outside the IT team, is a little bit patchy. Mobile device, mobile application management, again, a huge variance in the implementation of that. Some orgs doing it very well, very comprehensively, quite a few not really very far along the journey. Network architecture, we see VLANs frequently, but nothing further than that. So all you're doing is separating out your broadcast domains, but you're not actually putting any controls in place that are going to prevent inter-VLAN traffic. And you need to protect those key assets. Logging and auditing is often the poor cousin of cybersecurity, but it's definitely going to save you in the event of an incident. It's an early warning system, as well as a source of forensic analysis, and that's often not given sufficient attention. Asset registers are often incomplete if they're there at all. How can you protect what you don't know you have? And then there's a lot of work generally in the sector on the policies, oversight, and governance piece. Where we've felt that the CSA has been most successful, unsurprisingly, is in organizations where SLT has really grasped the security nettle. And in this regard, I'm going to show this little cartoon. We all know the idea of outrunning the bear. I don't have to outrun the bear. I've only got to outrun you. And sometimes that can be the thinking or the mindset in executive leaders. They all want to know, how are we doing compared to the organization down the road or somewhere else locally? Are we doing better than them? And the danger there is sort of outrunning the bear. If we're doing better than them, we're okay. And of course, the problem is with cybersecurity, well, there's a bear just around the next tree. So if you take your eye off the ball and you sit back and relax, then you're one step away from compromise. So finally, it's very much designed to be a supportive exercise. Larger teams in bigger organizations, often it's a chance for them to discuss what they do to others in the wider team that they don't necessarily get a chance to do in their day-to-day. And it can really be quite a cathartic exercise. Sometimes I feel like I'm more of a therapist than a sort of security consultant, because people find that we're asking questions that make sense of you, to you rather, and you don't have to translate your answer for us when we're coming in. And sometimes a sort of outpouring of, this is what we do, and this is what happened, and this is why we're where we are. So that's one of the sort of soft outputs from our cybersecurity assessment. Great, enough talking from me. It's important to know what somebody else thinks of the CSA, and I'm delighted now to join Alex on the chat show part of the stage. So Alex, you've done quite a lot of work with Jisc in various forms over the years, and you last did a CSA with us back in 2023. Tell us how that worked for you guys. And
I think the first thing, and I'll be open and honest, we're big fans of Jisc, and we're big fans of what you're doing in the sector, and it's collaborative as well as being consultative. And that was probably one of the things that we picked up as a team, was we learned as much, we got out of it as much in learning about the CIS controls, picking up what we should be doing, as how useful it was. And I talked to this yesterday with the 16 questions about us using as a battering ram for resource to go up to senior leadership. So it's a double-edged win for us, because we got to learn. We also got an output from that the weaknesses is great, but also the fact that actually, unlike a normal audit, you highlighted loads of strengths. The spider diagram, and it's funny. I think one of my things is I'm always asked, well, how does your diagram compare to X college up the road? We all like to compare our results, don't we, and our student intakes and our funding, and totally agree that bear sneaking around the corner is right, but equally it was good to at least be able to present that third-party view of what we're doing, celebrate the successes, build on those areas of weakness that have been clearly picked out. Probably one of the most valuable things for me, unlike the auditor's report, as you say, tick box, was that 30-40 minute session with our senior management team, where you guys presented what you'd found, what was good, what wasn't, and they could pick questions. And I think a lot of it, you were backing up what we've been saying for quite some time. We need to get student MFA right. We need to get shadow IT out of the way. Yeah, I think that's my angle on it.
Yeah, good. How helpful do you think it was to you guys in terms of building that consensus then with your senior leadership and sort of building a coherent roadmap to get everybody on the same page?
It's easy, isn't it, for our leadership teams to maybe take what we say internally with a pinch of salt, whether that's us saying, yeah, we're in a good place, or it's us saying, actually, we're not in a good place and we need to invest. So I think as a third party that's got a huge investment in our sector, I think it gives that reassurance in both directions. I think that's what we found from it.
Yeah. Is it something that is worth repeating? Is it a repeatable exercise?
I think that it's interesting. We picked it up as part of the requirement to do an IT health check, which came from the DFE in the last funding cycle. And we decided to do both the IT health check and the CSA. And the idea being we'd probably do IT health check every year, as was requested. 1 year we'd do a deeper pen test, and the other year we'll do CSA. So I think what we're probably going to stick with now is alternating between CSA and a deep pen test.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I think that I love the idea of overlaying that spider diagram and seeing where we've grown. And equally, the control set will change, won't it? And there'll be areas where actually we drop back just naturally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's that consistent approach to it.
Absolutely. No, that's great. Paul, I'm not sure how we're doing for time. Have we got questions from the floor for myself or for Alex?
14 minutes, so
we're
we've
doing
got plenty
okay.
of time at the moment. But there is there is a question from the
Come
on
join
here,
us.
if you like,
Yeah.
sort of side of it. So I think Young Soon has asked, do you cover supplier management and security risks associated with third-party suppliers?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, isn't it? It's one that I think we're all grappling with in the sector. There was a very good session in the auditorium yesterday about third-party risk. It's part of the CIS controls that we base our CSA on. It's not actually within our question set, so we don't focus on that on the CSA at the moment, but the CSA structure is extremely flexible, and I can see that as we collectively move forward in our sort of risk awareness as a sector, that's going to come into sharper focus over time. We will start doing that. How have you found that
I would see
your
the
third
fit. I would see
parties?
the fit there with being with your asset inventory, and probably for me that my instant feeling there is that would help the shadow IT argument, because actually I'd probably say we're fairly happy with our supply chain for things that we know about within IT services. Probably a lot less happy with the shadow IT and the cloud. And I think it will bring that to the forefront for our senior leadership teams to understand. I was talking to somebody on the abnormal stand earlier on, and it's an AI phishing tool, but equally they look at your 365 and look at what the scope of your credential use is. And one of the things he's just mentioned to me is there's 1,300 and something services that we're supposedly using our Microsoft credentials for. Well, I struggle to get past about 50, counting on fingers and toes, and it's that angle. I think that will be useful addition.
So, in terms of the recommendations that the CSA gave you, how have you gone about sort of acting on those? I mean, you end up with a vast number of recommendations across the 11 areas. And obviously, you've got limited resources to tackle those. How did you go about sort of prioritizing those? Were any of those recommendations particularly challenging for you and your team to work on?
Yeah, one of the best recommendations you made, and it sounds silly, and now it's mandatory anyway in Cyber Essentials, was student MFA. It had been a huge battle with our senior leadership team. This fear that, if we've got this barrier to students enrolling, that they're going to enroll somewhere else. And we'd done a lot of work with the colleges in our local area, and we'd done a straw poll around, who's using student MFA? And my angle back to senior leadership team was, if they don't come to us, they'll be going to X college down the road, and they'll be setting up MFA on day one. So again, it's things like that, and it's a prioritisation exercise, isn't it? It was a case of, is there some low-hanging fruit there that we should just be fixing snappily, and then equally, what of that list is larger long-term projects? Vulnerability management was the one that stood out, and I talked about it a little bit yesterday, but we know we needed to do it. We know that we've got some tools and some automation, but it highlighted again that resource problem. So for me, it was a case of, okay, the vulnerabilities that come out of it, they go straight into our ITSM tools tickets, and we'll pick those off in a priority order.
Yeah.
But the recommendations kind of split them into quick wins and deeper thinking.
Yeah, and just to put that in a bit of context, tell us a little bit about the team that you've got around you to do that. Have you got a dedicated security function, or somebody who's got cyber as their kind of sole focus?
If you'd have asked me that a couple of weeks ago, I would have said yes, we've got a dedicated person. Unfortunately, they're leaving us to work in central government, and we're having a rethink about that. But it was a big battle to get a dedicated cyber person, and I think our angle moving forward is that we'll have someone that at least coordinates from a cyber perspective, coordinates tickets, coordinates cyber essentials, CSA. Might not get involved too heavily in the technical aspect, but certainly from an administrative point of view, we're going to have a dedicated role. From a technical aspect, that'll sit within our infrastructure team, which is five members of staff there.
Yeah, okay.
James, I was going to say we've had a couple more questions that may help, if you like. Peter Hirecock has mentioned, any thoughts on CSA being used as a justification evidence for joining the Janet network?
Oh gosh.
Oh. Why are you not on the Janet network? Is that a sales pitch that I shouldn't be saying?
And then I think there's another one here. How often would you recommend doing a CSA with the constant changes? It could be void with the CIS requirements changing and reflect the framework evolving. Question mark. So it's kind of how often do you recommend, I think?
Yeah,
with the CS,
I think if I understand the question correctly, if we've made recommendations and then the underpinning security control framework changes, does that invalidate what we're saying? My view on that is I don't think the security frameworks necessarily evolve that quickly. So yeah, there are changes that come and go. Certainly if you look at specific benchmarks like the Microsoft 365 audit that we do as part of most CSAs, well that gets updated by CSA at least annually, if not several times annually. Every time Microsoft changes one of those dashboards or releases new features or new tick boxes that you need to pay attention to, somebody in that volunteer team at CIS is picking up on that. So we're currently on newly released version 4 of the 365 benchmark, but the next draft is already in progress and somebody's already looking at that. So in my time, in the last 12 months of work on a CSA, the number of controls has gone from 60-something to 126, just in that area. So there's an example where the underpinning benchmark changes very rapidly, but the CIS critical security controls themselves, I think, evolve much more slowly, as do the other frameworks that are very similar. So I can't see anything that is recommended by CIS today as a good thing to do, not being a good thing to do tomorrow or in 3 months or 6 months or 12 months' time. There might be additional things, and certainly as we move infrastructure more to the cloud, and I'm talking not of 365 here, but Azure or AWS workloads, then there's a whole cloud security piece that isn't very well developed by the CIS controls at the moment, and that's an area that we might want to do a little bit more work with our cloud team as part of our CSA engagements.
This is always a tough one, if you like, from anything. How much does it cost? There's somebody just put in there as a question.
Yeah, so it's basically charged on a day rate, and it's an 8-day engagement. So we've got a bit of time back in the office after the whole thing is over. to write up and to peer review and quality assure the reports that come out. So that takes a bit of time. So yeah, 1.5 days essentially devoted to doing the scans and the audit of your 365. We've then got 3 days of those half-day interviews, followed by about 3.5 days in the back office. So yeah, probably with the VAT, it's somewhere in the region of about 10k.
Cool, thank you. One thing just personally for me, I know you've sort of touched on it. What does good look like, if you like? Almost that benchmarking piece that was sort of mentioned, if you like.
Do you want to have a go at that, Alex?
It's a bit, I don't know if you want to have one, but would it help to have an aggregated sort of across the sector?
I think a sector aggregate might be interesting, but it'd have to come with a health warning, wouldn't it? That it is just an aggregate. I guess what is good is actually the full hexagon or whatever shape it is at the full level of all implementation. But
well, that's what best looks like, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we know that if you do all 153 critical security controls to the max, you're in a good place. Still not going to be 100%. Still not going to guarantee you're not going to be a target, but it's going to minimise your exposure. If you want to scale down from that to say, well, what's good enough? That's a different level of risk discussion, and that's determined by, well, what's your appetite for something bad to happen, to decide what's good enough. So that's a complicated question.
Cool. I don't know if anybody in the audience got any questions they'd like to, or we've got one here. Sorry.
We talked about MFA.
Yeah. Sorry. There we go.
I'm not used to these. Just talking about students and MFA, what degree of MFA have you got, i.e. logging on when they're on site to a desktop, MFA or cloud, or sort of what level?
So we treat being on site as a factor. So one of the big pushes from our senior leadership team was not to disrupt any on-site learning whatsoever. So if they're on campus, whether that's on a physical machine or they're joined to our Eduroam, we'll treat that as a factor. Anything 365 away from campus, though, MFA is in there. What probably the most interesting thing we found was all of the fuss wasn't generated by students, and they came along at enrolment. We'd got a little stand almost at the end of enrolment before they collected their membership card. We gave them a flyer. There was a little video. About 50% had signed up by the time that they got home, and then in the first week we got into the high 90s. Students are used to it. They should be using it for their personal accounts, their Instagram, their Snapchat, and everything else. I don't think that's where the resistance comes from. But I totally understood senior leadership's point of view about on-site and not if they've not brought the phone to class or the phone's run out of battery or whatever, not disrupting the on-site learning.
We've probably got time for one more if anybody's got any other questions, either for my colleague James or Alex in general around NEFE issues. If not, we'd like to say a massive thank you to Alex for being honest and sharing his opinion on the side, and thank you, James, for giving us an overview of the CSA service and its benefits. Thank you.
Okay.